Welcome to another episode of Safe Space, the podcast for next generation family business leaders. Today we're joined by Kelly Willis-Green out of Toronto, Canada. Kelly, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Francesco. I'm really looking forward to this.
Yeah, the emotional side of money is one of my favorite conversations. But before we go there, can you share with the audience a little bit about you, your background? How did you become to be a wealth coach?
Well, let's see. I'll start by saying that I have had a lifelong fascination with people and their money. I don't know, I should have had more hobbies as a kid, but I have just been fascinated, and that led me to a career in private wealth management as a marketing professional. So always interested in the human side of wealth. In 2013, I became a certified money coach, really with the intention of trying to understand wealth psychology and what our clients were experiencing. In 2016, I married someone who had been successful in the real estate business. And then I experienced firsthand some of the realities of stepping into a new realm of affluence. And fortunately, I did have my money coaching background. So I was aware and had some of the tools to navigate these new circumstances, but a lot of people don't. And so when I retired from corporate life in 2021, I started my podcast, Serious Coin, Rich Conversations About Wealth, to help people who've come into money understand it. And we talk about the lifestyle, financial, psychological and emotional sides of having wealth. And so, today, money coach, podcaster, and speaker. And really my mission is just to help people thrive with their wealth by having a more conscious and healthy relationship with it.
Okay, cool. So where do I start? So there's two places I want to go to. So
Sure.
let's start with the first one of because a lot of family businesses, spouses marry into the wealth. They marry into the family business. So can you share from first of all, what was it like marrying into wealth, right? And how did you handle that dynamics as a couple, right? And what was it like for you? What were the triggers that came up for you? Then we'll get into the whole wealth coaching piece.
That's really a good question. I will say, well, first of all, you had Jennifer Risher on recently who talked about stepping into wealth, sudden wealth. Now, she wasn't marrying into wealth. She and her husband created wealth at the same time, but I thought she did a beautiful and articulate job of explaining some of the complexities and the challenge to identity. And I actually had her on my podcast a couple of years ago, and we were laughing because she talked about how she grew up in a very frugal environment. And then when she had affluence, she was still hanging on to those frugal tensions that were inherited patterns. And, I kind of joked, like, did our parents have double families? Because I very much grew up in that same environment where frugality was next to godliness, and it was a sign of being a good person and morality, as Jen had alluded to as well. So being in a circumstance where there was now more of an opportunity to spend has been difficult for me. But I would say initially, even before we were married, I would say that I was very fearful of giving up power in the relationship. And so I started off by splitting everything down the middle. If we went out to dinner, he paid one night, I paid the next time. When we traveled, split it down the middle. And that was limiting for me because I was trying to match him stride for stride, and my resources were not as abundant as his. And it was limiting for him because he was cognizant of that and trying to maybe not stretch me financially, and so maybe not making the choices that he would typically make. And what I found over time in doing that, I was actually, even though I had engineered that, I was vaguely resentful because what was even wasn't necessarily fair given our incomes and net worth. So I had to come around to that feeling of not giving up power. And going back to the money coaching, I was equating money and power, as a lot of people do.
So let's talk.
And
So
okay.
you bring up a great point. This is going to be a juicy conversation. So you had this belief that money equal power. So that was a false equation you had going there. How did you realize that you were desperately trying to cling to power using money as call it the same currency as power?
The currency. Well, basically, in trying to split everything down the middle and feeling that I would somehow be the junior partner in the relationship if I relinquished some of the spending to him. And really, what I came to see through a lot of conversations that we had, and awareness that I've had through coaching, that there's all kinds of capital that we bring to relationships. And my husband brings so much to my life beyond financial capital. I almost get choked up thinking about it. And I bring a lot to his life as well. And celebrating the various forms of capital that we each bring and figuring out our way. But it does take a lot of conversation. I think that being curious when you're having those conversations, what is it like for you? What if the situation were reversed? We had a lot of talks late into the night over time.
So audience, there's your first little nugget takeaway. Relationships bring different types of individuals, bring different types of capital to the relationship. And it's about being aware of what capital are you contributing to the bottom line of the relationship. It doesn't have to be financial, right? And you can equalize that way. Okay, so let's talk about, it's interesting that I've been fascinated by the emotional side of money since 2007 when I wrote a book at the time called Money Model, The Path to Authentic Wealth. It's interesting that the industry, so the financial services industry, legal, accounting, insurance, anyone that touches money, and in our case, family businesses, tend to focus on the what and the how of money. They rarely consider the why. How do you feel about it? Where does that come from? Why do you think that is, Kelly?
I think
Why is there such a gap?
I think it's outside their training. It's outside, and as a result, outside their comfort zone. I think as well, I'm going to turn this into an opportunity for advisors, because I think that advisors, when they get right with their own relationship with money, open themselves up to being better advisors to their clients. And first, what biases might I bring as an advisor? What are my blind spots? Where am I judging? What did I grow up thinking about wealthy people? So getting clear, getting conscious about their own relationship is one way they can, turn this into an opportunity. And then two, approaching with compassion, not suspending judgment, being curiosity and compassion, I think, are, the pair of traits that you need for any successful conversation, particularly one that might be slightly challenging. And the third thing I would say is get comfortable with having the conversation. I think today, having wealth psychology conversations as part of an advisory team is a little bit like philanthropy was 15, 20 years ago.
Yes, exactly.
In that I worked with advisors, throughout my career, and they never wanted to have that conversation with clients because it was outside their comfort zone. What if I suggest philanthropy and the clients aren't interested? Ooh, maybe I've insulted them. Or I very quickly get into deep water because I don't know that much about it. And so I think these same fears might be at play for advisors, but they could do so much for their clients, particularly clients who are in transition with respect to money. And they don't have to know it all. There are people like you, there are people like me that they can bring and refer to, but they have to have the courage to have the conversation. I mean, what's your view? What do you think?
I absolutely agree with you, Kelly. And you bring up another little nugget for the audience, which is we all have beliefs about different things, men, women, God, sex, power, money. And we take those beliefs into relationships, all relationships. So as you point out, the more we as humans, whether we're advisors or family members or parents or children, need to understand what our emotional relationship with money is, because we're going to bring that bias to the table.
Absolutely. Yeah. And most of us are not conscious. How we think, feel, and act with money is happening at a subconscious level. And it isn't until you go back and look at your money history at a deeper level that these things become conscious. And I'll give you an example that I think people will be able to relate to, a very simple example. A consultant who I know has been very successful in her field, recognized, you know, very experienced, and was struggling to increase her hourly billable rate to competitive rates, despite the encouragement and I'll say urging of her partners in her small consulting firm, and despite that being the competitive rate. And it wasn't until we were discussing her childhood memories and messages around money, and she made the connection that her mother had told her back when this woman was a teenager and a babysitter, there was an hourly rate post midnight that was higher than pre-midnight rates. And her mother, out of love and a genuine desire for her daughter to be as good as she could be and successful, but her mother would say, do not raise your rate post midnight. You need to be the one who does more and goes above and beyond and differentiates yourself, by doing more than is expected. And she made the connection that this was a cap on her adult financial ceiling. Now, that was just an isolated conversation, but that message was repeated throughout her youth, and it's showing up today. So it always shows up. I had a couple of clients actually send me the same quote a week apart, and you may have heard it. It's the Swiss psychologist Carl Jung who said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." And if you're calling it fate, you don't have agency over it. You can't change it. And that's just not true.
That's such a great story. I'll just share, one from a client perspective. We have a client we work with, and, she's one of three siblings, successful entrepreneurial family. And she's in her 50s now, and she showed no interest in being involved in the money conversations. It was always, for the boys to do that.
Mm.
And when we helped her uncover, her beliefs about money, or her money history, as you called it, what she recalled was when she was younger and her parents didn't have a lot of money. They were in the growth of the financial capital, the money. She said life was simple. All the families were happy. Everything was going great. And as her family and her parents' friends started to accumulate wealth, she started to see divorces and drug addictions and just misuse of money. And she made the decision, it's the money that's doing that. So therefore, money's dangerous. I want nothing to do with it. And that was the driver.
Bingo.
So advisors, as you're listening to this, you may have clients that are next generation members that are showing, from your opinion, a lack of interest in the financial discussions. Be mindful that there's a whole bunch of beliefs about money that are influencing that perceived lack of interest. So I was really curious about this stuff back in 2007. I posed a question. I did some research around this. It was a very simple question, and I love your comments on this. So the question was, is there connection or correlation between how we do money and how we do relationships? And what we uncovered was that they're directly correlated. How we treat our money is how we treat our relationships. Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I would say how we treat money is an indication of our relationship with ourselves. So it's not just our relationship with other people, but our relationship with ourselves. But it's interesting you make that analogy, because I sometimes will have people when I'm coaching them think about, write a letter to money and think about what kind of relationship they want to be in with money. I mean, if you think of relationships, to your point, if you were very possessive of a person, a friend or a romantic partner, and you were, the equivalent in money would be hoarding, then how good a relationship is that? How much is that person going to want to spend time with you? Versus if you neglect that person, don't show it respect, have no interest in spending time with it. So, if you sort of personify money, that's sometimes not for everyone, but it helps some people understand it better. But at the end of the day, it really is a relationship with ourselves. I always say money is like a mirror, right? A mirror is just a piece of glass. It's a reflective surface. It's nothing more. Money is intrinsically neutral. But when we look into that mirror, what do we see? And it's not just what we're seeing, it's our perception of what we're seeing. And since most of us haven't really examined our money habits, it's more like a fun house of mirrors with all these distortions until we go through the process of getting a little more conscious about it. And then we can make choices about what we
Kelly, you
see.
talked about, we look in the mirror and it's a perception of what we see. Can you expand on that for the audience? So can maybe give an example?
Oh, so many examples. It's really, people perceive money very differently, to your point, and that is a product of what they were taught, what they observed, what they overheard growing up. So money can be so many different things. It can be a way of trying to get our needs met. It can be a way to create belonging. Most of the time, money is a woefully inadequate tool for trying to get our needs met. But we project so much on. I sometimes feel sorry for money, for all that we expect it to do and be in our lives, when it really isn't the money.
So it's important that individuals understand that somewhere along the line, an event occurred, like with your client, where they made a decision about money and they've never really had a chance to examine that. And so audience, just as you're listening, we're talking about, these beliefs about money, and beliefs can be changed. But we have to identify the core belief first. So can you share how you help your clients transform their money history into what I call maybe we can call it, intentional money, so that it's not default, it's intentional by design.
Yeah.
How do you help them transform that?
Default is a great word, because that's what we all do until we know. So it starts with what we call the core process. And I trained with Deborah Price, one of the pioneers in the field at the Money Coaching Institute of California, and she's still a mentor to me to this day. Her process, and now mine, is you do a money biography of your earliest money memory every year of your life to today. And then we review that together. And clients very often will see the patterns. I don't have to tell them. I just ask the questions and the patterns float to the top. So that's one piece of the picture. The second piece of the picture is we do a family patterning exercise where we go back and look at your family of origin. Who raised you and how were they with money? And then how are you with money? And then you start to see the overlaps. Okay, I can see where some of these patterns came from. And my clients, for the most part, have some very healthy patterns. And we want to honor those, celebrate those, and be grateful for those patterns that are positive, and then identify those that are limiting. The third leg of the stool is some money archetypes. Similar to Jung's work with archetypes, there are 8 money archetypes. And so we have a process of evaluation for determining which archetypes are active in a person's life. And it's usually a combination. And then which ones are the most positive and how we need to move there. So we present them with a visual framework, a picture of what their money relationship looks like. So that is the first point to your point about awareness. Now I'm aware of what I've been doing. All this has been subconscious before, but then let's face it, these beliefs are longstanding, they're sticky. Change takes time, it's not overnight. So we start with awareness. When things come to the surface, you're in a situation, you stop and reflect. With that new knowledge, it's very empowering. If you can't name it, you can't tame it, right? But once you have that knowledge, you can. I mean, to give you an example, just outside of money, but I think shows the power of this, the power of awareness. I was widowed back in 2011, and one of my responses to grief was I woke up in the night thinking I was having a heart attack. My heart was beating repeatedly, beating outside. I thought it was bouncing off walls, and I was drenched in sweat. And I thought, well, my husband died. Now I'm going to die. And it wasn't until I went to a grief counseling course, and I still remember the day I looked up on that PowerPoint screen and it had symptoms of grief, heart palpitations, breaking out in sweat, anxiety, panic attacks. Oh, this is grief. Now I know what it is. So the next time it happened, I know what you are. this too shall pass. So it's amazing. The same is true in money. Just having that awareness helps. Second,
sorry, go ahead. No, you go ahead. Then I'll come back. Go ahead, please.
Realizing so many people feel that they're the only ones that feel this way. They have a lot of shame around their feelings. Normalizing the feelings and helping them to know that they are in a safe place to have those conversations. And then 3, there are various tools and strategies that we use to help people move. It could be everything from affirmations, if they're so inclined, various exercises that we have them do, and of course, meeting and coaching and being a bit of an accountability partner on some changes. Sometimes there's practical steps to be taken, which then results in them getting a financial plan done, maybe, or, whatever it may be, referring back. Or sometimes there's deep therapy work that needs to be done. In which case, if there's deep stuff, I send them to a therapist or recommend they see a therapist. But often it's just giving them the tools, and people know what to do. People have tremendous inner wisdom.
So you mentioned the 8 archetypes. I'm curious. Can you tell us what they are?
Okay. Oh gosh, you're going to test me here.
Oh,
There is
the
the
audience go, what are those?
yeah.
What are those?
There's the victim, the martyr, the creator artist, the innocent, the tyrant, the warrior, and the magician. And I'll speak to the warrior and the magician because those are the most powerful archetypes and the ones that we seek to cultivate. The warrior is, if you picture, I always use the analogy for clients of driving a car. You want the warrior driving the car. The warrior is resourceful, hardworking, self-starter, has agency, knows what to do, knows they can't do everything, knows how to ask for help. They master the material world. And we can think of a lot of warriors. The magician has that inner trust, sort of masters the inner or spiritual world, knows that they're going to be okay, knows that they will find a way and the solutions will show up. A lot of entrepreneurs, when you talk to them, they've got the warrior, but they've also got this magician that they just always knew they were going to be okay, or they knew they'd find a way. Some of the other archetypes are less helpful, but existed to either protect or were a way of coping. And we acknowledge those archetypes. I always say you want them in the back seat or you want them in the trunk with duct tape over their mouth. You don't want them making the decisions, but they're there, and you don't hate on the other archetypes.
So you talked about the victim, and there was another one that sort
victim,
of like
martyr. I mean, we talked a little bit, when we were talking earlier about the person who often rejects money, sometimes that is the creator artist who was brought up that sometimes you've probably seen this, there's a moral superiority to not having money.
Mm-hmm.
Right. It's funny. I was just in Paris recently, so I've been consuming a lot of Hemingway, and Hemingway wrote a lot in Paris, and I just finished A Movable Feast, his last novel that he wrote at the end of his life. This is 1922. Hemingway was a struggling writer living in Paris, and he was writing that we never accepted that we were poor. We felt we were superior people, and the people we looked down on and rightly mistrusted were rich. And I'm thinking, nothing's changed. But that's the creator artist at work, that sort of moral superiority.
Audience, as you're listening, ask yourself, what archetype are you? And at the end of the show, Kelly, we're going to ask you to share how people can get a hold of you. And I think it'd be a really nice little gift to maybe offer folks these archetypes, right? Because it's such a way to really understand where you are, not where someone is, and where they want to move to. And as you said, one's not good, one's not better than the other. They all have their space, but we don't want to be having the artist or the victim or the martyr being the driver.
No.
Right?
No.
Right?
And that said, it's also not a neat little package. Very often we have this assessment tool, but we are adding on to that and I guess, enriching the perspective on which archetypes they actually are through these other exercises. So I don't want to give people the idea that, oh, okay, I've got my archetypes and away I go. But what it would be good for is maybe just starting to create some awareness. When people just start to even pay attention to how they are with money, they'll start to make improvements.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So Kelly, we're coming to the top of the show like I knew we would. So if there's, I like to ask all of our guests the same question. So based on your experience, your knowledge, your wisdom, and your area of expertise, what's one piece of advice you can offer the current generation and the next generation in family-owned businesses?
I love this question, and I really enjoyed hearing the different guests that you've had answer it. I'm going to say, relates, I said it earlier, curiosity. Follow, identify and follow your curiosity. To the younger generation, your curiosity will lead you to innovation and creativity, which are important in any field that you're in, probably lead you to your bliss, to maybe a field of work that you want to pursue. To the older generation that may be looking to, as a new chapter in their lives, looking to redefine themselves, curiosity will look, I think it's led me to magical places, and it will also keep you young. Curiosity will lead you to new adventures, learning, exploration. Those are all really important for delaying the onset of dementia or Alzheimer's. I remember hearing, I just listened to a podcast not long ago with Jo Malone, the fragrance entrepreneur, and she talked about creativity. And she said, creativity whispers, I follow. And I think to myself, okay, for me, it's curiosity whispers and I follow.
So Kelly, thank you so much for your wisdom, your time, and just being you. Love the conversation. I knew it'd be really rich. So if folks want to find you, learn more about you, and how they can possibly hire you to help them better understand and master their relationship with money instead of the money mastering them, how do they find you?
Sure, that's a good way of putting it. Well, I have website, kellywillisgreen.com, and my podcast is Serious Coin. That's on all of the platforms. We're working on a new season, will be out this fall, but you can find me on my website.
Okay, Kelly, thank you so much for being on the show. And audience, as you know, our guests volunteer their time, their wisdom, because they care about you. They recognize that being the next gen of a family business can be a lonely place. And we just want to offer a sense of community, because the issues we talk about are the issues that you're facing and that your peers are facing. So if something that Kelly said really spoke to you, drop us a note. Let us know what you liked, rate the show, but most importantly, share it. Be generous and share the wisdom with those that you care about.
Thanks, Francesco.